Those gongs mean we are here for the final talk, which is actually a panel for the afternoon. And I think this is going to be a really fun one. So I'm going to invite Marina Marquesic from the European Crypto Initiative up to introduce our panelists. The title is Decentralization and How to Speed It Up in Light of Regulations. So thank you, Marina. Take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for the last panel today. I would like to welcome Sergey Kunz, the co-founder of 1inch Network. Zaki Mannion, the co-founder of Sommelier. And Faustine Florent, Adan's president. So thank you so much, everyone here, to be present. We're going to have a very interesting debate, at least to our opinion, decentralization and how to speed up in light of regulation. So first, the first question that I would want to pose, it's a very basic one. What is decentralization, why it matters, and how it is influencing your everyday life, like the life you're leading as a founders and leaders of your projects. So maybe we can start with Sergey.
Sure. Hi, everyone. First of all, it's a pleasure to stay here on stage. So regarding decentralization, this is kind of it's a thing which is still in development. We see right now 6 mining pools on Ethereum, which actually three of them can just put together and decide on something and scam everyone. And this is actually Ethereum is not decentralized from my point of view, and it will be very soon, in like 5 days, I hope. So it will be much more decentralized than right now. Decentralization for me is it's a set of actors which have the same world view. Yeah, doesn't matter where they are. And if some of these actors decide to like do something else, then we get kind of fork in the new branch, and the best, most efficient, most valuable branch would win. Yeah, this is what's happening in the forks of blockchains. Yeah, we have seen Bitcoin fork to Bitcoin Cash, and at the end we have still the normal Bitcoin branch, which is the most efficient one, and we have like additional fork of Bitcoin Cash. Yeah. So the same happened with Classic, yeah, Ethereum Classic and Ethereum itself. So and very important in this setup is that there's no actor which decide everything, because this is vulnerability for this set of this system or ecosystem. That someone just decide by the gut feeling, maybe by getting some cash from someone or some benefits, or was threatened by someone, and they can maybe decide something what's not good for this ecosystem. That's why decentralization is very important. Also for us, from 1inch, we came to the idea to introduce the governance, which is kind of still in development. Also for other projects, it's still an experiment. But from our point of view, such an approach of decentralization and governance and kind of ecosystem could help also in the real world to govern countries maybe in the future, companies at least as well. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. What about you, Faustine? You are working with Adan, which is an organization working with regulators. How is it impacting your work? What do regulators think about decentralization?
As for now, I think regulators don't think that decentralization exists, actually. And it was hard to convince them that there was a decentralized system that was growing, aside from the traditional financial sector. If we look at regulation that is currently being built at the EU level, at the very beginning, they were not aware of this new paradigm. So when they thought about this regulation, they thought about a regulation for middlemen, for intermediaries. And at the very beginning, we had to explain them that there were decentralized finance growing, and it was working very a very different way than traditional financial applications. And so finally, they got to know those new protocols, those new actors, but they did not really understand if decentralized really exists, if it was really possible to run financial applications in a decentralized way without middlemen, without intermediaries. And that's why MiCA debates were really complicated, TFR debates were really complicated. It's because regulators still need to understand and are still looking for people behind those protocols and people they could impose rules to. So if there is the operator of decentralized platforms, can we find them? If developers, if people behind the governance can be people obliged to the regulation, because it's still very strange for them to see this new financial paradigm, this new decentralized paradigm. So I think we still need lots of education efforts from the industry to make them understand this new word and to make them understand that the rules that we are building right now can be the same than what we apply to the traditional word. Otherwise, it will be unadapted, inappropriate, and we won't be able to develop that in Europe.
In a way, they're used to centralized entities, and decentralized ones are very different from what everyone has been used to for years. What about Sommelier and your work?
So
Zaki?
I would say that there's basically, I would echo Serge's views, which is there's two basic things that can tell you how decentralized or whether or not something is decentralized. One is how this goes to like sort of how resilient it is. Like, how does the system perform under stress or under duress or in a disaster? And basically the question is, can you replace any of the actors within the system and the system would still do the same thing? So could all of the stakers in a proof of stake system leave? Could a new set of stakers come? Would anyone be able to really tell the difference between the system with that set of stakers and another set of stakers? If the answer is no, then you have a decentralized system. Same thing with with the software development, right? Like if you have many different entities that have been collaborating, if most of those entities are switched out with other entities, would they still be able to develop the same software and accomplish the same thing, provide the same services to users? So it's ultimately, there is this test of resilience about, and so, we went through this process with, the Cosmos ecosystem of most of the developers leaving the original company that built the Cosmos network and the Cosmos ecosystem and the Cosmos stack, and yet the system still is thriving, 2 years later. You also have this other question, which is this question of constraint, which is you have to convince a very large number of people anytime you want to change the system, and everyone involved is able to dissent on Twitter, on various public forums. There is a lot of arguing and discussing about everything, and ultimately you are meaningfully constrained, similar to the way like a constitution constrains a country, or a system of sort of multiple branches of government constrain each other. In a decentralized system, there are systems of constraint that constrain what any actor can change about the system, and it takes an enormous amount of sort of essentially political leverage and convincing before anything could change in the system. And so I think both of those properties, and so, such as life, I am part of more than one multi-entity decentralized community that we all work on software and protocol changes and marketing and onboarding users onto Sommelier and onto Cosmos. So that's one aspect of my life, is constantly being in these multi-entity collaborations. And then on the other hand, I do like to build protocols, make protocol changes, imagine new tokenomics, all of those things, and that has made me into this sort of weird developer politician that I think many people in the blockchain space are learning more and more what it's like to be like, and some people don't want anything to do with it, and other people thrive in this ecosystem.
Thank you so much. So the title today is Decentralization and How to Speed Up in the Light of Regulation. Why? I think, to my personal opinion, this panel is very important and it's very timely because we have not seen so much regulation and so many regulatory activities happening before, and it's just the beginning. So in Europe, we have had the markets in crypto assets regulation, which is basically regulating the issuance of crypto assets and crypto asset service providers agreed upon politically, which means that will become into action applicable in 2024. The same with the transfer funds regulation, and there's an AML package, etc. Also in the US, we have seen a lot of regulatory activity. And I think it is very important for us to stop a moment to look at what's happening and to understand what could be the strategy to move forward, especially when it comes to decentralization. This time, I would like to start with you, Faustine. You've been working also in France during the presidency. So in Europe, it is very important which country is presiding the council. And you had so much experience there, but also on the European level. What is happening? Like, what is, in a way, the summary? What have you seen in the last year, for example, on those issues?
So that's what you said, Marina. We agreed about political deals on two major pieces of regulation for the crypto asset markets, which are MiCA and the transfer of funds regulations. And I think that we avoided the worst case scenario with those both pieces of regulation. Because actually people who are working on building those regulations are also trying to understand and to learn about what is the crypto asset market. And that's why sometimes they have ideas that are not always good or appropriate. And at several stages of debates, it was a question of should we include in the scope of those regulations the decentralized finance? Those regulations were not made for decentralized applications because those were rules for intermediaries. And it would have been very detrimental to the development of the ecosystem if DeFi fell in the MiCA and the TFR scope. But that were questions that regulators ask, and the good approach is that they reached the representative body at EUCI to understand if it was the right way. And finally, in those two political deals, they decided not to put DeFi in the scope of those two pieces of regulation. So it doesn't mean that DeFi will remain unregulated. It just means that they want to take the time to think about the best, the most appropriate, and the most adapted regulation for DeFi. So it means that from now, so we have those political deals on MiCA and TFR, so the work will go on because we need to write those texts. It will be technical work right now, and I do think that the industry must be there to support the work of regulators, European institutions, so that the texts are the most appropriate. So there will be those technical discussions on MiCA, but we are also on the way of MiCA 2, where DeFi will be treated. And so we will now have to support the work of European institutions who will think about what could be the rules for DeFi, but also of other international bodies like IOSCO, which is also thinking about what could be the framework for DeFi. It will be the same for NFTs, but it's another topic. And I think we avoided the worst also on TFR because at some time it was a question of regulating P2P transfers and ask the whole set of information that you're asking when you're doing transactions in the intermediated way. So we do need to take care because on those questions, even if we had this great victory in June, we know that not all European MPs are passionate and positive about crypto asset markets and their developments. And so we need to take care that this question of regulating P2P transfer does not come back, because it's really possible. So my main message is that the industry must be ready with all this work that is coming for regulators, where they will need to have the information and maybe recommendations from the industry. And so that we do need to have a common message to frame the best regulation, because unfortunately it won't left unregulated, so we need to get prepared.
Nobody is going to do it if we don't do it. Like, this community should definitely be the one that is talking to the regulators and explaining why decentralization matters and why it is important. So going back to the community, do you feel, this is a question for both you, Zaki, and Sergey, the community has a consensus on what decentralization is and what should be the strategy, especially when we think about regulation. So we know decentralization is a spectrum. We know there are different layers when it comes to blockchain. There are different projects, DeFi as Lego protocols. What would be the strategy? What would be your, let's say, view or advice on this? Would you like to start, Zaki?
So I guess I come down to what I view as like sort of my mission in this space, which is to like summarize is that we should, the purpose of blockchain, the purpose of decentralization, the purpose of decentralized finance is to take the infrastructure of digital markets and make it an open source public good. Like, and ultimately all of this is just like everything that we do is a means to that end. I don't know that my experience has been is we as an industry, like I don't even know that any other people in the industry share that view, but that's my view. And that is the view that I try to sit here and promote to regulators as like, what is the end game here? Like, why do all of this? Why change anything? And the purpose of changing things is that digital markets are eventually all markets. All markets will be digital markets. And if digital markets are institutionalized and run by gatekeepers and rent seekers, like that we will be enshrined in society. And this is the one opportunity that we will have maybe in the next 1,000 years to change what that looks like and to try and find decentralized market mechanisms that actually work, that allow people to trade and to find counterparties and to exchange risk and exchange assets in a way that is basically becomes part of the fabric of the internet.
Thank you.
So from our point of view, a community don't have kind of the view how it should looks like, yeah. This is kind of very, very difficult thing. When the regulator came, they tried to kind of limit the functionality, yeah. From one side, to protect retail customers, maybe also institutional customers, because people can also act in terms of like, can steal money, can abuse someone, and for sure they need to regulate to protect the people. But from other side, overregulation is also bad, and from our point of view, we should be prepared for the regulation, but we should also teach, how you said, we should teach the regulators what we have right now, what we are building. We are innovating. We have, in the last 5 years, a lot of innovation happened in the space. We got automated market makers. We got kind of decentralized approaches, how to interact with, in peer-to-peer manner, to exchange assets. We got also a really nice technology to get more privacy on the blockchain in terms of tornado cash, and now we see that regulator can be also very strict and react from our point of view not in the best manner, and just put the programmer into the prison just because he wrote the code. And this is still kind of, how I already said before, experimental, and we need to communicate also with the regulators. And they need to be much faster than they was before, because now innovation happens every month. Yeah, if you like 1 year in DeFi are 10 years in traditional finance, I would say. So yeah, we need to improve that.
Do you think that regulation is going to open new possibilities for designing, let's say, protocols, products, or you see more limitations on this side?
I would say there are limitations, yeah? So the cool thing in DeFi is the freedom. So you can just write over 2 nights, like I and my co-founder Anton Bukov, in New York on a hackathon over 2 nights, a new solution, new innovation by aggregating decentralized exchanges, yeah, by using algorithms. You open actually over 2 nights a new market, aggregation market, which didn't exist before in this space. And strict regulation wouldn't like allow us to do that, yeah. And we just build it, and people start using that. So we build it in most kind of decentralized approach. So it didn't matter that we were still there. This program would still work. The first version of 1 inch would still work without us. And this is kind of what decentralized systems has as a benefit, kind of. Yeah, I don't think so that it makes something faster. It makes slower, but it makes sense to regulate, to protect people, yeah, but not to over-regulate.
Zaki, what do you think? It was regulation, it will, in a way, as we see, maybe complicated, or it's going to be harder to be compliant. Do you think that early projects were benefiting for being there first, for being the pioneers, for example?
So I do, I mean, there has been a pattern in this industry in general where early entrants got the benefits of asking forgiveness and not permission. And to not having even like regulatory structures that even described what they were doing in the early days. And that has generally been an advantage to being early. But I think like one of the questions, again, is the guidance, the goal when communicating to regulators is trying to say, how do you get the social benefit? Like where is the point of maximally leveraging the social benefits while minimizing the social harms? And the innovation aspect of it, the permissionless aspect of it, the ability of anyone to write software that then becomes part of like a deployed money-moving system, I think is like one of the most valuable aspects of the system, because of the fact that we're trying to discover like what the future of digital markets will look like. We have to have people, without having to, hire an army of lawyers and stuff like that, be able to just deploy software, because that is the innovation cycle, and that is the world in which we're building things that are actually robust. But that crossing the chasm from ordinary users to like the ways in which the chasm gets crossed, from like the people who are the sort of DeFi users and the DeFi creators and the people who are comfortable on chain, to the like sort of regular civilian world. That seems to be a world that like regulators should be paying attention to, and we've seen the disasters like with Celsius that have occurred between companies that have been sort of bridging these worlds and not necessarily doing the most correct job of that.
Thanks. Let's focus a little bit on the recent events of Tornado Cash and the OFAC sanctioning Tornado Cash. How do you comment those recent events? And what I'm mostly interested in is, what we have seen in the space, different protocols, projects, how did they react to those events? I've heard this term over-compliance a lot in different debates on Twitter and podcasts. What do you think about it? And another question is, we're in Berlin today, in Europe. So those sanctions were aimed at the US persons and entities. What does this mean for Europeans, and what does this mean for European users? Who wants to start?
I would like maybe to start. So the thing is, OFAC added contract addresses to the list. It's something new, what didn't happen before. They didn't put the developers, they didn't put the company, which was kind of acting as labs, software development company. They just put these smart contract addresses. Yeah, and I guess some people from OFAC posted also on Twitter and deleted a few minutes after it that the Tornado Cash was paid supported by North Korea or something like that, without having any proofs or I don't know what else. It was crazy. So I'm scared. I have fear personally because based on this action from OFAC, Netherlands just took one of my friends into the prison because he wrote the half of the front-end code, JavaScript code. Yeah? He didn't deploy the smart contracts, he didn't govern the smart contracts, didn't run the front-end because it was on IPFS and also managed by the community. And they just put it in the prison and try to find out how we can what should we do with him from our point of view. So and from our point of view, OFAC attack free speech and also privacy because Tornado Cash is actually based on another project. They used a lot of open source code to build Tornado Cash, and this is an innovation in our space. It's introduced privacy on the blockchain, which is actually partially existing with other blockchains like Zcash and some other blockchains. But on top of Ethereum, privacy solution which helps you to hide your transfers, which makes sense. So, for example, Vitalik Buterin did a charity contribution to Ukraine, and he, of course, didn't want to show that because it can be dangerous. Yeah, so if you're flying to specific countries, you can get troubles because of this. Yeah, so also, this is kind of basic rights of a human to have privacy and free speech, and I think they acted like too fast and too aggressively. They maybe should speak before with the community about that before starting such actions. I'm scared personally because if every software developer, open source software developer can be put it in a prison just because he wrote part of the code, then a lot of people are right now under attack, I would say.
So a couple of things. One aspect of this is that I do think this seems like the most sort of regulation-aware time in the industries since maybe 2013. I remember, back then there was this question of whether or not miners would be money transmission, and this whole like money services business, money transmitter thing was sort of worked out in the US. And eventually it seemed like we achieved some sort of equilibrium that was acceptable for innovation. And now this like one particular set of facts, which is the sanctioning of a smart contract address and a developer have like basically reopened like a lot of debates, or like has created a level of anxiety that it might be unfamiliar to people who joined this industry in the last 9 years. But it's less unfamiliar if you have been like following the saga of like Tor and PGP and the development of like encrypted messaging protocols, that these sorts of frictions between the government has been part of the cypherpunk movement for a very long time. So like I think in general like this is kind of more to the norm. I think the other thing though that's sort of is whether or not these are like this is like a good set of facts to generalize from. So like to the question of overcompliance, right? We're trying to figure out what like a lot of companies that want to comply or like do not want the attention associated with being viewed as like sort of a non-compliant actor because they have other regulatory concerns. There are a lot of people who are like, okay, like let's try and generalize this. Like, what does it mean? How would we even apply the sanction, like OFAC 2, which this, like the authority that was used does not seem to provide the ability to sanction a software interface, which is what was done. It seemed to only provide a mechanism for sanctioning like a definable entity, which doesn't appear to be sanctioned. So this, like, there seems to be bad law, there seems to be bad facts, there seems to be a systemic misunderstanding of how Tornado Cash worked. All of these things are going to have to be worked out through litigation along multiple lines. But these are very difficult things to generalize, and these are very bad, is a very bad system to generalize from, because it seems like just like there's insufficient understanding applied on on sort of many sides, and this is going to have to be worked out. That's probably my main thought here, is that we are trying to generalize from something. The other thing though that was surprising to me is from years of building bridges, this is sort of downstream of basically the bridge insecurity problem, that bridges are hard, they're difficult to build securely. We have in this last cycle built many insecure bridges, and I was sort of expecting that there would be a lot of attention from regulators on the bridges themselves because of these bridge hacks, and it's sort of a surprise and somewhat unexpected that instead all of the attention fell on an anonymity provider.
Interesting. Christine, what is happening in Europe? What's happening in the US in terms of AML reactions to decentralization?
So this story rose lots of questions, but first we have to say that there is a regulation in the United States. There was this OFAC decision, and it was normal at some points that obliged entities complied with this decision. So that's why centralized platforms had to comply with this decision. And the questions that it rose, it was that at some points, I agree with you, it went too far. Actually, because some non-obliged entities to the OFAC decision took actions. So, for example, some decentralized entities and some actors that are not even in the scope of the future regulations. I'm thinking about, for example, GitHub, who had this decision to remove the code, and actually it has nothing to do with the OFAC decision. So it went too far because some companies decided to take actions, and actually they had not to. And it went also too far because at some points, not only US citizens were concerned with the decision and the actions of those obliged and not obliged entities. So it rose the question of also the influence of these OFAC decisions, that is a US authority, on other jurisdictions, and also because we are in it, in the current EU building of the regulation. So actually we are afraid of the wrong lessons that the regulators could take regarding this story. So first, thinking that mixers are bad. Actually, mixers, it's kind of a technology. It's a technology. You can do a right use or a bad use. And actually, it's okay to do a regulation to prevent the bad use. So the money laundering and the financing of terrorism through technology, we have to. But we can't say that the technology is bad. So we hope that it won't prompt regulators just to prohibit, for example, the development of mixers in the future. And we also do hope that they don't have the idea to look at entities that had nothing to do with regulation, so the developers, people behind the governance, Mixer as a tool, and that they concentrate on the bridges, the people, the intermediaries that are able to limit, to prevent, and to fight against money laundering and financing of terrorism. So we do have to pay attention on the lessons that they will take following this story, and to make them understand that we still need for privacy reasons, for many reasons, those tools that can be used the right way, they can be used the bad way, but we need them for the development of the whole decentralized ecosystem.
I just wanted to make one comment, which is I'm not sure I agree with the characterization of Tornado Cash as a mixer. And I'm not even sure if another department of the US Treasury called FinCEN actually did, in official guidance, define what a mixer is. And Tornado Cash does not meet that definition. It doesn't commingle funds. You put your money into Tornado Cash, you take your own money out of Tornado Cash, you do not have access to anyone else's funds, and no one else does. And so I do think that again, it represents this very interesting conflict between, and you understand though where this came from, right? If all you see in the press is, North Korea is laundering money and using the service, the people who do North Korean money laundering and anti-proliferation work have to do something. It's not unexpected that they did something. It's just there probably could have been a better education by the industry in an attempt to try and figure out what could we actually do. Because I think most of us agree that North Korea having large amounts of cryptocurrency is a bad thing.
I have to add shortly. So Tornado Cash had also a compliance tool. So what I would imagine that, for example, someone needs to cash out, and this person used Tornado Cash, then maybe Binance, where the person is cashing out, would like to ask for the compliance proofs on Tornado Cash that this money is coming from the other wallet. It was possible, yeah? And that someone used these privacy tools in a bad manner doesn't mean that you have to disable and to destroy this tool itself. They have any way to cash out somehow, yeah? And they can follow through these financial institutes where they cash out, yeah? At the end.
So we have 3 minutes left, and I have a very easy question for all of you, and you all have 1 minute to answer. How to speed up decentralization?
By onboarding new people, new developers, new users. Of course, to onboard new users, we need to introduce institutionals in the DeFi space. That's why we need kind of a regulation, which is not over-regulated, but compliant with the institutional real-world financial standards, and then you will grow.
I think that we still need to make leaders, political leaders, regulators, understand the opportunities behind decentralization. Because why they don't hesitate to imagine very strict rules or unadapted rules? That because they don't understand why we should let decentralized application DeFi grow, and what's the opportunity for citizens, what the opportunities also for regulation to build upon the technological opportunities of blockchain technologies and crypto assets. So I think we need to onboard also our leaders, our regulators, to make them understand why it's strategic for us to let them develop, and why actually it will develop anyway. And if, for example, in Europe we are too strict, or our regulation is not balanced between innovation and protection, actually it will develop somewhere else, that's all. And it's a pity for our industry, actually.
I guess the main thing I would say is more people in the space need to a little bit follow, more leaders in the space. We have a responsibility to sort of ensure that we are creating spaces in which decentralization can prosper, and that we are giving up more of our own power. Satoshi's example is very instructive about sort of giving up leadership in the community at a certain point. And I think most of us would have to, more of us who are leaders in the space have to think about at what point would we no longer want to be the leader.
It would be interesting if Satoshi would be still there, if someone would come for him.
Thank you. to all the guests, and thank you to everyone staying here with us on the last panel today.